Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, the podcast from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Each week, we bring you fascinating guests that are involved in the profession of surveying. My name is Tim Burch, and I'm the Executive Director for the National Society of Professional Surveyors and your host for the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on most of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. For more information about the podcast and NSPS, please visit our website, nsps.us.com. So, without further delay, here's our next episode of Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast. Hello, everyone. This is Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Burch, and this one is Section 2 of the new Minimum Standard Detail Requirements for ALTA NSPS Land Title Surveys. They're going to be effective on February 23rd, 2026. Now, if you haven't listened to Section 1, the purpose, please go back and take a peek at that. Otherwise, this will be Section 2, and we will follow it up with the remaining sections of the ALTA standards as we go forward with our good buddy, Gary Kent. So, without further ado, here's Section 2 of the Minimum Standard Detail Requirements for ALTA NSPS Land Title Survey Standards, here on Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast. Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, a shortened, very special episode in a series of whole programs that we're going to be doing, talking to the ALTA NSPS Land Title Survey man, Gary Kent. You know him, you love him, you're catching him across the country as the 2026 standard comes out. Gary, thanks again for taking the time to join us and going over these standards.
Absolutely, Tim. I want to be as helpful to everyone as possible as they slide into these new versions. Absolutely.
Very good. Well, we did an earlier one that really covered, let's call it Section 1, because that's really what it was, the purpose of all of this. And that's if you go back and want to listen to that podcast on its own, that's a good earlier one that covers a little bit of the history and a lot of the things of why this standard is, why, how it's come to be and how it continues. Gary, let's just jump on in. Let's go into Section 2. The request for the survey. What can you tell us about that?
Sure, Tim. So really no change whatsoever in this section from 2021 to 2026, other than the reference to the 2026 standards. But it's worth a quick overview of what's in Section 2. The first sentence talks about written authorization. I think this is critical. The cleanest way to do written authorization is to have a written contract, and I promote that every time I do a program. I know that a lot of times surveyors are not using written contracts, or using, understanding, of course, that you always have a contract. The question is, was it written or is it a verbal contract? And if a claim comes along, it's much easier to defend against a claim based on a written contract than it is on a verbal contract. But the other thing that a written contract does is it allows a surveyor to be in the driver's seat. You can list who is it that you're going to certify to. As an example, you can put some qualifiers in there. You list the Table A items. Maybe you have a little qualification about or a reminder about what we can actually accomplish with utilities or whatever. You can talk about due dates and who can order the work. And it's pretty important. It's also a vehicle whereby you can put in the scope that you need. And if there's a lender, and that's really why we're doing these, there almost is always a lender, put the onus on the client to provide you copies of the lender's survey requirements. So there's a lot that goes into that, and it's really, really important to use a written contract if at all possible. Beyond that, there's a second sentence that has been around for a number of years, and all it says is, and this is really reflecting past practice that probably less now than it used to be, but in the past, it was not unusual at all for the title company to be ordering the land title survey, but they were virtually never paying for it, right? They were assisting in getting the process underway by ordering the survey. And so this next sentence comes along and it says, unless specifically authorized in writing by the insurer, which is the title company, they are not responsible for the costs on a land title survey. Sometimes surveyors look at that and think that the title company is trying to get out from under something, but really it's just reflecting probably less practice now than it used to be, but the title company ordering the survey. And when they would do that, my first question was always, who's paying, right? Because that's who I need to send a contract to. So this is just a reminder really to surveyors to figure out who ultimately is the client. The attorney ordering the survey, probably not paying for it. The title company ordering the survey, probably not paying for it. A lender who might be ordering a survey, probably not paying for it. It's typically either the buyer or the seller. And so that's just a reminder to the surveyor to make sure you identify and, as I said, in my opinion, get a written contract signed by whoever is responsible for payment.
You know what, Gary? If this surveying thing doesn't work out for you, you really would make a good liability carrier salesman. So you might keep that in your back pocket as a future. If, like I said, if this survey thing doesn't work out for you,
yeah,
those are all great reminders of what we should be doing and how we should be as business people going about our business. And it's not just the survey that's actually limiting liability when doing the work. It's a contract that's limiting liability in what you're delivering.
right. Yeah, that's absolutely true, Tim. And I'll keep that in mind for my next career. So
Well, you never know. You might need it.
Yeah, you never know. I'll go with that, right? The Section 2 goes on. It says the request must specify that a 2026 ALTA NSPS land title survey is required, and then to identify the Table A items that someone may be interested in having. So that's just a clear statement to make sure you've got something in writing saying this is what we want. The next part, and really kind of the remainder of, not the entire remainder, but a good chunk of Section 2 is addressing kind of what I would call atypical properties. You've been asked to survey an easement or a campground where there's a water and electric hookup on all 264 campsites, or it's a golf course, and what are you locating on a golf course, or it's a mobile home park, doing a land title survey on that, understanding that typically mobile homes are personal property, not real property, and so questions can come up. And these scenarios, one of them that is pretty pervasive out there right now are the wind farms and the solar farms. Although I guess Trump is trying to get rid of wind farms, but I don't know that that's going to happen. And there are very specific requirements on land title surveys for solar farms and wind farms. And so our guidance under Section 2 is that, you may be asked to do a survey on kind of one of these oddball types of properties or interest in properties. And we go on, we say the scope of work related to those types of surveys needs to be discussed with the client, with the title company, and with the lender. Right? Everybody needs to have an understanding of, this one's a little different. So let's make sure we're all on the same page on expectations and managing expectations. I think that's a really important thing. I get quite a few questions about these atypical types of properties, whether it's a land title survey of an easement, which I did one time, or a lot of surveyors are getting involved in solar projects and wind projects, and you can do those as land title surveys. That's what the requirement is, but they're different, right? They're a little bit different, and we start thinking about non-fee interests and that sort of thing. So I think the point of that is that everybody needs to be on the same page, right? I have no interest in delivering a survey that is not what someone is expecting to see, and so we want to have those conversations with people.
Well, and you hit on it that it's really important that yeah, it is known who the relationship is between you and your client, that who is paying the bill, because like you said, I know back in my private sector days, yeah, there were lots of times where, like you said, the lender or the attorney or the title company would put in a request on top of what was I've already contracted with, that is like, oh, but we want to add this to it. Well, but you're not paying the bill, and that's an opportunity to push back. And it's not just an opportunity for surveyor to make more money. It's limiting liability and limiting your overextending yourself for a fee that was not negotiated upon.
Yeah, and I tell people in my programs, I think it's an important point to keep in mind, and that is that the ultimate user of these surveys, which is ultimately is the title company, but certainly the lender is using it for their purposes, and the buyer is. But oftentimes in many states, and I might take just a second to say that typically the survey is being paid by either the buyer or the seller, and which it is depends on the state. In my state of Indiana, the sellers virtually always pay for the survey. In some states, it's the buyer. In some states, it's just however they write the contract. But the point is that neither the seller nor the buyer is really the ultimate user. And so it's kind of a weird situation where we are performing a survey for a title company, for a lender who is not who we are contracted with. And I think that's important for surveyors to understand, that we have to recognize that there are other parties interested in what we're doing, and maybe with additional requirements that for example, our seller client, thinks, no, I want the Chevy version of this survey because let me get out of this for as least money as I can. Well, yeah, but your lender may have other thoughts about that. So surveyors need to understand that they will be responding to requests from other than their contracted party, and they need to figure out how they're going to deal with those.
Oh, exactly. And it's a shame that both the buyer and the seller, more times than not, don't truly value what we're engaged to do in providing this survey to get to clear title and all of these other, all the things that it's used for. And unfortunately, that's something that's probably never going to change. But we still need to be able to do the best possible work we can and make it representative to what we've agreed to in a contract. So
yeah,
I like what you've said there. Yeah, Section 2 is very short, very direct and to the point, but boy, is that an important one.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Covers a variety of things. In fact, the very last sentence talks about access to the property, that the client shall secure permission for the surveyor to get access. And notwithstanding the fact that in some states surveyors have right of entry, in some states they don't, and the client may be the buyer who doesn't have the right to grant access. So that sentence is pretty important in making sure that it's not up to the surveyor to secure access. There needs to be some collaboration there so that we're clear to go on the property.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and you're right. Myself, I came from right next door in Illinois. We've had right of entry for years, but to realize that there's still a lot of places where right of entry is not a given, that's it makes it very, very tough for the surveyor to get their work done.
Right, and as any number of people have told me, a shotgun will override a statutory right of entry anytime.
Yes, absolutely, it does. So, any parting thoughts on section 2? Anything that other than, I mean, I think you've said it very succinctly. It's a very, very short but important section.
Yeah, no, I the only things my parting comments would be written contract. I give serious consideration to that, and secondly, review those couple sentences about the atypical types of properties, and just recognize that we do run into these sorts of things, and you've got to have the conversation with all the interested parties when maybe it's not totally clear what I should be doing here in this scenario. So review that part and then make sure you're having those conversations.
Exactly. And chances are your liability carrier will thank you for following those I won't say suggested, but those insistence of that section, and that it obviously makes for a cleaner a cleaner relationship once it's all said and done.
It does, because presumably in negotiating a contract, we have thought through what they're trying to accomplish, what we can do, what we can't do. It's all spelled out, and you're absolutely correct. If a claim would happen to come along, probably the first thing that your errors and omissions folks are going to ask is, what did you contract to do? And they will be presumably a lot happier if you have a written contract than if you don't.
Yep, exactly. Well, good. Well, thank you, Gary, for that. For section 2 of they are the new revised 2026 edition of the ALTA NSPS Land Title Survey Standards. Like you said, very little has changed, but it's very important that we know what's in them and we've followed them to the letter.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up for this session over section 2 of the new standard. Either go back, you can hear if you haven't heard the first section 1, the purpose, please take time and go back and do that. Otherwise, stick around for the next sections, which we'll cover in subsequent recordings. Thanks. You've been listening to Surveyor Says, the NSPS Podcast, brought to you by the National Society of Professional Surveyors. If you have any questions about today's episode or any other topic, please email us at info@nsps.us.com, as we are here to help. Subscribe to the podcast on most of your favorite streaming platforms, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. For more information about the podcast and NSPS, please visit our website, nsps.us.com. And remember, it's a great day to be a surveyor.